The 2016 presidential race is heating up with more GOP candidates jumping in. Meanwhile, Hillary Clinton's favorabilities seem to be increasing. Latest polls show 65% say Clinton has strong leadership qualities. So what gives? Joining me now is former White House press secretary and co-host of The Five, Dana Perino. She also has this new book out, and it is a New York Times #1 bestseller. The Good News Is, and the good news is, Dana, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. You were an early reader of that book.
I was, and I am a big fan of it, too, because it's fantastic. You did a great job with that book. Let's talk a little politics first and come back to it, and I'll talk about my favorite parts.
Okay.
Hillary Clinton, she seems to be weathering the scandal. What's going on?
Well, I do think that our media, in some ways, we're just so hungry for the next thing, to turn the page for the next news cycle. I don't think we actually really know how she's weathering these scandals. And if you look at the other polls like Wall Street Journal and AP, they had a different result. Now, all of those polls are good polls. They're just getting different things. And it's really early to tell. Remember this. First of all, she hasn't answered any questions about any of this. Okay?
No.
So one of the ways that you weather a storm is you just ignore it. And that seems to work. The other thing is that none of the candidates that will be running against her in the next year and a half have begun to try to define her and run negative ads, things like that. So we don't really know. Sadly, I actually think for the American people, regardless of the politics, there is a question here about a former president whose wife was the Secretary of State getting money into the family's foundation that then results in an approval of that government's project that was in front of the federal government and required Secretary of State approval, which they got. That actually is not political. That seems to me like something that, at the minimum, the government, the Justice Department and the FBI should at least take a look at.
I have to tell you, it's not one example. It's lots of examples. And I think you're right that people generally just haven't digested this, got their arms around it. You know, you would think that it wouldn't just be Republicans asking questions. It's anybody who would go up against Clinton. And now we're seeing Elizabeth Warren meeting with private backers. What do you make of that? Is she going to come out?
A friend of mine who I trust very much, she cannot understand why Elizabeth Warren doesn't just get in this race. She thinks that Elizabeth Warren could beat Hillary Clinton just like Barack Obama did in 2008. I actually don't personally see that. I think that I remember when Barack Obama first came on the scene, and my head turned. I'm like, who's this? I like his sound. I like what he's saying. Elizabeth Warren doesn't excite me in any way. Can I mention one other thing about the Clinton Foundation and the money that they got from those foreign governments? That money was stolen from the people of those countries. The people in those countries do not live in the fancy mansions that those leaders of those countries that were writing big checks to have Bill Clinton give speeches and to get approval from Secretary of State Clinton. That money was stolen from the very people that Hillary and Bill Clinton say they want to help.
And many of them have repressive regimes
Absolutely.
when it comes to women.
And they don't talk to the press either.
And they don't talk to the press either. You know, quickly, one more candidate to talk about, Huckabee announcing recently, he is really getting slagged in his own house among Republicans. Glenn Beck today saying that he's a spoiler. The Wall Street Journal coming out in an editorial and just slamming him, and yet his numbers are strong. What do you make of that?
Well, look at it's almost kind of a parallel, right? So the polls can tell you only so much, but Hillary Clinton has support from her Democratic base. Mike Huckabee has support and has maintained it for years with a certain branch of the Republican Party. The test for him will be to see, can he get past some of this criticism and can he unite the party? Can he broaden that base? He's going to have enough money to get to the debates that start in August.
Soon.
Yeah, that's not too long, not too far away. And those debates are actually really going to matter because everyone will have enough money to stay a little bit competitive. all
right, we've got to save some time for And the Good News Is.
Okay.
As I said, I had a chance to read it. You shared it with me early, and it's a great read.
I'm so glad you said so, because it's actually kind of nerve-wracking before the book is out and even after to ask somebody to read your writing because you don't know. And plus, I wasn't sure if I see her in the hall, what if she says, oh, that book was really good, but didn't really mean it. I would have known
No, it was
that
great.
You didn't like it.
It was great. It was great to hear about your childhood, where you grew up. That was so fascinating. But the question I really have on my mind is about George Bush, what he was like to work with. What did you learn from him? Because the book is so great at saying, here's how you succeed. And I think that the president was great at teaching you some fundamental lessons.
One of the reasons I wanted to write this book was to answer the question of how does somebody like me, who grew up on a cattle ranch with no political connections, end up at age 35 as the first woman Republican press secretary. Part of that was because he really trusted me. He liked my common sense thinking. He liked the way that I communicated with people. And he liked my sunny disposition. That's one of the reasons I call it And the Good News Is. The other thing is that till up to now, the personal side of George W. Bush has not been included in any of the analysis of his presidency. And there's very few people that could have written this book, and I'm one of them. And I wanted people to know what it was like behind the scenes. And I would say the most important lesson he taught me that is a leadership quality that people in business don't talk about enough is forgiveness. And the ability to forgive and to move on, to let things go and to focus on a goal. He also taught me about passing on the credit so that you could advance a larger goal. When the FARC hostages were released in Colombia, he was trying to get the Colombia Free Trade Agreement passed. Democrats were all over Uribe saying that he didn't do enough to fight terrorism. President Bush helped orchestrate those FARC hostages being released. And I was there in the Oval Office when he got the call from the CIA. And I said, oh, can I call the press and tell them and say you were sitting here? And he said, no, I don't want any credit. Give it all to Uribe, because he needs it more than I do. And he really could have, look, as a press secretary, you're always looking for some sort of good news to put out there.
So too bad for you, good for him.
Right, but better for the larger goal. Unfortunately, the Democrats came up with another reason to kill that free trade agreement.
Dana, it's so good to see you. Good luck with the book. I know it'll do great. Thanks so much for coming on.